Before we get started, let us have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, you know better than anyone that I need your help tonight. I ask that you'd forgive me of my sins, that you'd cleanse me, fill me with your Spirit, Lord, and help me to present this in a way that would be pleasing to you and to your children here tonight. Father, there's a lot of important information here, and I just pray that everyone will have open minds and hearts to receive it and to apply it to their lives and to share these things with others and their family, their friends, and so on, because many of these things have been hidden from us in our educational system. So, Lord, be with us and help us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, to begin my investigation into the teaching of bacteria to man evolution in our county textbooks, I started by examining 3 textbooks, one from middle school and 2 from the high school. The 2 high school science textbooks that I reviewed were biology and environmental science. The middle school textbook I reviewed was Interactive Science Course 2, which I think is a 7th grade book. My analysis needed to be based on the state of Florida's own standards for evaluating textbooks, which I thought were very good standards. Florida Statute 1006.31 of Title 48 K-20 Educational Code states that, quote, instructional materials recommended by each reviewer shall be, to the satisfaction of each reviewer, accurate, objective, balanced, non-inflammatory, current, free of pornography, and material prohibited under Statute 847.012, and suited to the student needs and their ability to comprehend the material presented. Sounds good? It was my goal to demonstrate to the board that the material concerning evolution presented in the 3 textbooks was not entirely accurate, objective, balanced, and non-inflammatory, nor suited to the needs of our students. The first thing I needed to check was their definition of science, because the modern definition of science is expanding to include theoretical science, which Brother Rich will go into again in more detail. Theoretical science is based on suppositions and guesses. These guesses are supposed to be rational, scientific guesses. Can you imagine what fun you would have in refereeing a game in which your favorite team is playing if you could make your calls according to rational, scientific guesses? No need for instant replays. You calls them like you think they should have been seen. Great, your team will win the game because you've already figured out ahead of time that it makes perfectly good scientific sense that they should win. Well, I don't have to go into this right now, but this new modern definition of science is being subtly worked into our Florida State science curriculum, and we need to be on the alert. I don't have to go into it because, thank the Lord, the 3 textbooks in question use the tried and true definition that has defined science for hundreds of years. This is the definition of empirical science. Empirical simply means based on observation and experimentation. What we can see, hear, feel, smell, and taste. It's measurable. I got this definition from Webster's New World Dictionary of the English Language, College Edition. Science is, quote, systematized knowledge derived from observation, study, and experimentation. Compare this with one of the newer definitions of science, not as subtle as most of the others, from the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. Science is, quote, the observation, identification, description, experimental investigation, good so far, and theoretical explanation of phenomena. There it is, theoretical. You can substitute the word speculation and guessing for theoretical, and they don't have any place in our science textbooks. Right, amen. As I said, thank the Lord, The Nassau County textbooks did not adopt the new definition of science, although it is floating around in some of the state curriculum for science. Florida textbooks are in danger in the future, and we do need to be on the alert. In our high school textbook, Biology, authors Miller and Levine state on page 5, quote, "First, science deals only with the natural world. Scientific endeavors never concern in any way supernatural phenomenon of any kind." A few sentences later it is stated, quote, "Third, scientists propose explanations that are based on evidence, not belief." And then a summary statement says, quote, "A goal of science is to provide natural explanations for natural events in the world," unquote. Now, if true science only deals with the natural, then science is dealing only with matter and energy. Standard 7 on page FL 25 of Environmental Science confirms this. Quote, "The scientific theory of evolution of Earth states that changes in our planet are driven by the flow of energy and the cycling of matter." So, right out of the gate, bacteria to man evolution violates true science. The whole huge evolutionary tree rests on a programmed bacteria cell that could not have come into existence by natural means. Its existence is supernatural because scientifically, life only comes from life. And programming only comes scientifically from an intelligent source, not matter and energy. And we talked last time about how cells have to be programmed. They've got their RNA, DNA, and all these molecular machines running around or swimming around in that cytoplasm doing extremely complicated things. They've got to be coded. They've got to be programmed, and they can't program themselves. An outside intelligent source has to program them. That means it's supernatural. And it violates the definition given in these books for science. And the case could really be closed at this point. But it is interesting to see how evolutionary scientists could possibly make a believable case for bacteria to man evolution when it is so obviously contrary to real science. A few evolutionists are honest enough to admit they believe in a theory that is not supported by true science. Sir Arthur Keith made this statement in 1959. Sir Arthur Keith was a leading proponent of evolution. In fact, he wrote the foreword of the 100th edition of Darwin's book, Origin of the Species. He stated, quote, "Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable." Dr. Karl Popper is a leading philosopher of science and an ardent believer in bacteria to man evolution. He plainly stated that his belief is not based on scientific support. He said, "Evolution is not a fact. Evolution doesn't even qualify as a theory or as a hypothesis. It is a metaphysical research program, and it is not based on testable science," unquote. In other words, Dr. Popper is saying bacteria to man evolution is not even worthy to be called theoretical science because it's not scientifically possible. It's purely supernatural. Sir Julian Huxley was the former head of the United Nations UNESCO. He was a biologist, philosopher, educator, writer, and was a leading evolutionist of his day. When asked why the scientific community jumped so quickly on board with Darwin's ideas, he did not say because Darwin had provided overwhelming scientific evidence. Instead, he replied, quote, "I suppose the reason we leapt on the origin of the species was that the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores," unquote. Michael Roos is also an ardent believer that bacteria to man evolution happened, but he knows his belief is not based on scientific evidence. In 2000, he wrote an article in the National Post, quote, "Evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than mere science. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, as secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity, with meaning and morality. I'm an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian. Evolution is a religion. And in fact, it is. Darwinism is the foundation of the religion of secular humanism. We threw Christianity out of our schools and replaced it with the religion of secular humanism. This should incense Christians. We need to get off our collective rear ends and do something about this. So, what strategy did the evolutionists who wrote our textbook use to convince readers that their theory was scientifically supported? Well, first, although they used a correct definition of science, they did not use a correct definition of evolution. Evolution can be applied to many things. In a general sense, evolution just means change. So it can apply to cars, airplanes, refrigerators, objects in space, which Brother Rich will get into, plants and animals, which is our topic of concern. Microevolution in plants and animals is change in a species of plant or animal over time. It's variation in the species. The change happens, they say, because of a change in environment and natural beneficial mutations. This is the definition that's used by these textbooks. They give examples of dogs, cats, plants of the same species that are different in size, color, and shape. They give other examples of how a change in environment caused different changes in size, shapes, and colorations of the species. This is survival of the fittest. This is like selective breeding, which has been done with plants and animals for thousands of years. No one argues that microevolution has happened in the past and is happening today. However, this is not the evolution that we're concerned with. The evolution we're concerned with is bacteria to man evolution, also referred to as macroevolution. And it is not happening today. Not in nature, not in laboratories, and it cannot be proven by empirical science to have ever happened in the past. The books attempt to lead the reader into making a leap of faith. They show that very intelligent scientists can prove microevolution is scientifically factual. Then they give examples of how Darwin and more modern evolutionists believe these same forces, survival of the fittest and natural mutations, will produce more complex forms of life from simpler forms. They present examples of how logical it is to believe that if part of a species gets isolated from another part, that one or both will eventually evolve into a higher order species. Examples are given of birds of the same species living on different islands that have different beaks. These beaks help them better eat the food available on their particular island. Other examples are given of the same species of squirrels, which got separated from each other many, many years ago in our nation's southwest. They have different fur colorations, different names, and other differences. Additionally, these textbooks picture similar bone structures in the flippers of whales, the wings of bats and birds, and the hands of monkeys. They state these homologous structures, homologous means similar, demonstrate that while a species may use structures for different purposes, the species shared a common ancestor. By definition, they say, homologous structures refer to those that were derived from ancestrally similar structures. They say the natural world is full of examples of homologous structures, and by the way, it is, which they say the theory of natural selection predicts should be the case. They use samples of developing embryos in amphibians, fish, chickens, and mammals, showing that the early development of these embryos are very, very similar. And so, this similarity, they say, reveals the evolutionary development of one species into a higher order species. Finally, two of the textbooks use the fossils of extinct creatures to show their progression from a dog-like animal, extinct dog-like animal, to a whale. About 5 different extinct creatures are used, showing the progression toward becoming a whale. You know, you've seen these pictures of the ape, and then it progressively gets to a man. Well, the same sort of thing with the dog-like creature and the whale. And what really gets me is next to the dog-like creature, in parentheses, it says walking whale. Thus, the reader's left to conclude that very intelligent scientists all agree that because microevolution results from natural selection and all natural mutations, that given a long enough period of time, bacteria to man evolution also will result. One book ends their chapter by specifically stating that it is no longer a question of if evolution took place, it's only a question of exactly how it took place. The other two books don't state this specifically, but they imply it very strongly. Now, I went through the so-called factual scientific support for evolution without oppositional comments because I wanted you to get the idea of the strength of this argument on our youth. And when you see the pictures that Rich is going to show you, you'll see these pictures even add more strength to their argument. But they have little or no scientific knowledge. The students that read this in their textbooks, you all, do not have the scientific background to analyze what you're being taught. I didn't have it when I went to the University of Michigan. And so it's overwhelming. I mean, here are these super smart scientists telling you that this has been proven scientifically. And so what happens is you and we become brainwashed. We file it in our filing cabinet in our brain that this is the truth. And then later on, when we get older and we learn more, we don't even question it because it's already filed. It's been programmed. And so we don't even question it. And I really think this also applies to scientists, to students who grow up and they're scientists, and these writers of these textbooks. I don't think they even realize that what they're writing about evolution violates their own definition of science. They don't even realize it. I don't think they're trying to be malicious. They're brainwashed, just like so many others of us. Brainwashed. So that's our situation. And, you know, all I can say is the devil's very good. He's very effective at what he does. He really is. Now I'm going to go through all the so-called factual scientific support for evolution used in these books and discredit every one of them. They can all be reduced to pure speculation. First, all the facts that are used to prove microevolution can be thrown out because microevolution is not the issue. Secondly, the examples of the birds, and they were finches that were found by Darwin in the Galapagos Islands, having different beaks doesn't prove macroevolution. They were finches when Darwin studied them. They are finches today. They got different beaks, but they're finches. This is variation within a species. This is microevolution. This is not macroevolution. The squirrels in our Southwest have different fur color and different names. One of them, Albert squirrels. The other one, Kaibab squirrels. It's just like, you know, the red squirrel, the gray squirrel, the black squirrel, you know, have different names. They got separated. And we're told in the book that they have other kinds of differences, but they never say what the other kinds of differences are. These little creatures running around are still squirrels, by the way. It's not a proof for macroevolution. Thirdly, similar homologous features like similar bone structures in whale flippers, bat and bird wings, and monkey hands could be the result of the same creator using similar structures in his creation. It doesn't prove they all came from a common ancestor. The same is true with the developing embryos. God may use similar development in the beginning stages of an embryo's growth in different species. It doesn't mean that it's showing evolutionary progression from simple to more complex living things. And by the way, when I was at the University of Michigan in 1963, in my biology book, they used similar pictures, only they also went all the way through to ape and man pictures. These pictures were done by a German evolutionist by the name of Ernst Haeckel, and they were proven forgeries in 1955. I'm going to the University of Michigan in 1963, and they're in my textbook being taught to me as fact, and they are still being used to some extent today, trying to convince people that evolution is true. However, the pictures in our textbooks, or the pictures in the Nassau County textbooks now, they may not be forgeries. I really hadn't studied that through. I don't know for sure. They may be okay, but they don't prove evolutionary advancement from a common ancestor. You know, it's not really that uncommon for the evolutionists to lie. The Nebraska man was presented in the 1920s as a missing link from ape to human, until it was found out that it had been extrapolated from a filed-down pig's tooth. One pig's tooth. And they're making pictures of this so-called ape man, you know, in the textbooks. That's the Nebraska man. The Piltdown man was found in England, and it was also promoted as the missing link scientists had been long searching for. It was conclusively exposed in 1953 as a fraud, a forgery. It was found to have consisted of an altered jawbone and some teeth of an orangutan. They filed down the jawbone of the orangutan and then combined it with the cranium of a fully developed, though small-brained, human being. Lucy, discovered in Africa fairly recently, was touted as a missing link. She was portrayed as having a face that was very human-like. Then more bones were discovered, and now most anthropologists regard Lucy as a 3-foot, 6-inch extinct ape. In regards to lying, the pictures showing the progression of an extinct dog-like animal to the whale fall squarely into the category of grand theft deceit. First of all, it is purely supposition that one of these extinct creatures developed evolutionarily from another. The last 4 of these creatures have webbed feet. The artists have no idea if their feet were webbed or not. The webbing would have decomposed if it was ever there to begin with. For all this to be the least bit believable, and if there's a possibility that it could be the least bit believable, we would have to know how many bones are available for the creature's reconstruction. You know, these artists can be very creative. Remember the Nebraska man? 1 tooth. Remember Lucy? Face that looked like a human. We would also have to know where these fossils were found to make a reasonable determination whether they were really sea creatures or not. You know, and also we'd have to know the comparative size of these fossils. In the book, they're not drawn to scale, so we don't know. And I've got a strong feeling that the last couple of these extinct creatures are nowhere near the size of a blue whale. But, you know, I did not study that out, but this is the kind of stuff they do. One of the books honestly admitted that it was difficult to picture how a dog-like creature could change so dramatically. That's an understatement. A whale's anatomy is totally different from a dog's anatomy. The eyes, the brain, the lungs, the blowhole, the flippers, the fins, and the size are all humongous differences to be evolutionarily overcome. We won't even mention that some whales don't even have teeth, but they filter their food through baleen strainers. Now, how did that happen evolutionarily? In short, every single so-called scientific support for evolution can be discredited completely and shown to be speculation. And yet, we have allowed our children to be brainwashed for years and years, especially since 62 and 63 when they took prayer and Bible reading out of the school. Our children and grandchildren, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Remember, one of the state standards that they were supposed to follow in their curriculum was that it should be non-inflammatory. However, this teaching of bacteria to man evolution in our textbooks should inflame all Christians. Our children and grandchildren from Christian homes are being told that true science supports their origin from bacteria, and when you go not quite so far back, from apes. And that's a big difference from what their Bible tells them, that they were created in the image and likeness of God. A literal rendering of Genesis account interprets the earth and all creation as only thousands, not billions of years old. And that age can be substantiated by a mountain of research studies, and Brother Rich will be referencing many of these beginning in January, Wednesday, January the 3rd. Students from Christian homes can easily be deceived in our public schools, like I was, into rejecting the faith of their parents and the God of their Bible. Christians should be incensed that this evolutionary theory being taught to their children has been used by despots like Adolf Hitler to kill millions of human beings because they were less evolved and they were contaminating the human genome. You may not know this, but the full title of Darwin's famous book, Origin of the Species by Natural Selection, goes on. It has a second part of that title, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Darwin's theory of evolution is perfect for justifying genocide. I mean, if you think people are undesirable, hey, they're just not evolutionarily evolved enough. They need to be exterminated so they don't contaminate the gene pool. It's a book that can be used to justify prejudice in its very worst form. Christians should be incensed that our children are being taught a theory that can radically change a student's worldview and code of ethical conduct. When I was in school, the worst things that were going on were running in the hall, gum under the chairs, and an occasional fight. Now we've got students lying dead on the floor and ground after being shot by other students. We've got an educational system that was in my day in the top 3 of the world. Now we're in the bottom third. In fact, it can be traced from this is from records from the United States Bureau of Statistics, that the exponential increase in destructive societal behaviors like murder, rape, robbery, pornography, divorce, unwed teen pregnancy, and such began right after 1962 and 63, when prayer and Bible reading were taken from our schools, removed because they were religious. Then we turn right around and adopt the religion of secular humanism, which is based on Darwinism. Yes, I am mad, and you should be too. Christians should be incensed that the Supreme Court illegally rejected Bible reading and prayer in our schools when one trip to Washington, D.C. is proof that this nation was founded by Christians on biblical principles. Now we have people telling our schools that the choir can't sing religious songs at Christmas because it violates the Establishment Clause. They can't have certain types of displays or decorations at Christmas because it violates the Establishment Clause. This was a term that the Supreme Court came up with. They do not even know what our First Amendment says. Our First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The schools that were having prayer and Bible reading back in 62 and 63 were not Congress. They were not passing any laws respecting religion. They were just exercising their God-given rights under our Constitution to honor the God of the Bible. That's all they were doing. And they were only taking up a couple minutes of class time. That was it. And yet, we allowed our Supreme Court to turn that whole thing upside down. And they used separation of church and state from a term that was taken not from the Constitution, but from a letter that Thomas Jefferson sent to the Danbury Baptists, explaining to them they didn't need to worry about a state religion, meaning State of the Union religion, like the Church of England, like we wouldn't have, everybody forced to be Baptists or forced to be Presbyterians or Catholics or Methodists or something. And people, back then, they understood that our founding fathers, when they spoke of religion, they meant Christian religion. That was the only legitimate religion they recognized. They did not recognize other religions. They did recognize Judaism as legitimate because it was based on the Bible. But they didn't recognize these other religions as legitimate. So, the Supreme Court turned justice on its head and removed prayer and Bible reading from the schools. They did not even mention that a prior Supreme Court decision in 1892 called the Trinity Decision had established that this country, from its inception, from the Pilgrims and Puritans, was a Christian nation. And the court supplied a great deal of documentation to support its decision. And this is why in our schools, it's fine to have Bibles in our schools. But it's not fine to bring in teachings of other false religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness. No, that's not fine because our country is a Christian nation. We can't go over to India and go into their schools and preach the gospel. No, we're not allowed to. And, rightly so. But they promote, freedom of religion, like, if we do this for one religion, we got to do this for all religions in our public arena. No, that's not true. People have the freedom to worship as they please. That's right. That's America. But not come into a public arena like having Muslim clerics come into our Congress and pray. That's blasphemy. That is blasphemy. And we're doing that. And we're doing that with city council meetings and such. That should not be allowed in the United States of America. But it is. The devil got Christianity removed from our schools and established the religion of secular humanism in its place. Quite a trick if he can get away with it. And he did. Christians should be incensed and we should take action. One action we can take is pray. This is a spiritual battle. The enemy controls education and has power brokers in every important area of this country. This is a spiritual battle. Pray hard. A second action we can take is to attend Brother Rich's presentations on Wednesday evenings in January. We need to inform ourselves of the truth so the enemy can't snow us with false science. Because young people, if it hasn't happened already, it's going to happen to you. If you start sharing some of these things, you're going to have your classmates come up with some wild stuff that they think is true science. Or maybe they just make it up and they really know it's not. But you got to know it's not. So keep attending. We need to inform ourselves of the truth. Thirdly, we can write our state and federal representatives expressing our anger that our children are being taught they came from apes in their science textbooks and why this is wrong. A fourth way to take action is to support the Nassau County Board of Education in making a very difficult, politically incorrect decision that will bring the full fury of the anti-God crowd against them. Pray for them. Pray for yourselves, and pray for all of us, because the devil will come against any of us, young and old, if we stand against his evolutionary lies. He's got his claws in too deep. However, if God be for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. James 4:7. If we got God on our side, we don't have to worry, but be prepared. We're in for a fight. The decision by the board is going to be made tomorrow, or it's supposed to be made tomorrow. They meet at 6:30 p.m. at the board office, 1201 1201 Atlantic Boulevard. And you can get there by following Route 200 into Fernandina Beach. You turn right on Atlantic and get into the left-hand lane because you're going to turn left within about a quarter mile. There's a little sign, and it's going to be nighttime, so it's going to be hard to see that sign where you turn left. It's just past North 11th Street. If you get to North 13th Street, you've gone too far. The Central Park area is right across the street. But you cannot see the Board of Education office from the road. You won't be able to see it. So I'm just giving you that heads up. This decision, by the way, has already attracted state attention from both sides. So if the board decides for the truth, their decision will be made known to the Florida State Board of Education. And if the State Board of Education decides for the truth, their decision is going to come before the entire nation. This nation could then restore prayer and Bible reading back into our schools. Prayerfully, we will see a national miracle begin right here in Nassau County. And if the board decides against the truth, hey, the Lord will open another door to accomplish His purposes. Brother Rich's series on scientific truth beginning Wednesday, January 3rd is going to be a door opener. Don't miss it.